Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this important conversation sponsored by Muslim Aid USA to shine a light on how the community really treats divorced women. I am so excited to be here with two of some of the real luminaries in our community to discuss this in a frank manner, asking targeted questions about how we can respond specifically to the scourge of domestic violence within our community, but also to some of the taboo that's associated with being divorced that sometimes holds people back from leaving abusive relationships. I want to first start off with a couple definitions. What we define as domestic violence here tonight is really about power and control and domination. And that can take many forms. It can be intimate partner violence, where people are seeing this happening to a loved one within the family, and it can be verbal, it can be emotional, it can be physical, it can be sexual, it can be spiritual, it can be financial. It takes many forms. But it's really when one person seeks to dominate and control another person through an exercise of violence. So I would like to first introduce our speakers for tonight. Our first speaker will be Ustad AbdelRahman Murphy, who is a teacher at Cullum Institute's seminary and also leads the Dallas Roots community. How are you? Thank you for joining us.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for having me. Like you said, this is like an incredibly important conversation, so it's just an honor to be a part of it. Alhamdulillah.
Absolutely. And our second speaker is Ustad Yasmin Mogahed, author, speaker, and beloved teacher from the Al-Maghrib Institute. Thank you so much for spending this evening with us.
Assalamu alaikum, Yasmin. It's my pleasure. It is an essential topic to be having a discussion about.
So I want to first start off by just explaining that Muslim Aid USA is really dedicated to trying to shine a light in these sometimes dark spaces. 1 in 3 women will experience some type of domestic violence within their lifespan. And Muslim Aid USA, through the partnership with LaunchGood, you can go to launchgood.com/DV to check out how you can help right there from home to support people who are in need. They have both domestic programs and international programs, domestic programs in New York through a shelter there through Pillars of Peace, an organization through ICNY that helps the Islamic Center of New York, that helps people there who are in need of first response, as well as through a hospital program in Somalia to help victims there have a direct connection to services to help them alleviate the suffering that is found in domestic violence homes. So I want to first start off with our first question and let you guys kind of lead the conversation. A lot of victims don't leave their abusive spouses due to a fear of the backlash from our community. And specifically, they are scared that the community shuns divorcees and more specifically divorced women. I'll first ask this of Ustad AbdelRahman. What do you think we can do to sort of help ease this tension, this fear of this backlash as a community?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. So this is a really big question. And I think with a lot of these questions, we're going to have multiple pieces. So I'm just going to offer one of the parts of the solution that I think could help contribute to solving this problem, specifically in the stigma department, where there is unfortunately a stigmatized reality for the survivors and those who are in the situations of being abused by their abusers. The first thing I'll say is that everybody has to really understand the life of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Really. And what I mean by that is that religion is a tricky thing in that everybody will use religious texts and scriptures one by one, case by case, cherry picking them in order to create an argument that supports their own nafs, who they are, right? And this is one of the dangerous things about religion, is that it can be manipulated. One of my teachers, he said that religion is like medicine. It can be helpful or it can be abusive. And so how then do we make sure that the religion is not used to create and to make more extreme this stigma? Because a lot of where the stigma comes from is the misappropriation of religious texts, that, oh, divorce is not a good thing in the Islamic tradition, and that it's looked down upon, and that you need to be patient. Allah Ta'ala rewards those who are patient, and inna Allah ma'as sabirin, and have tawakkul, and have it. And again, there's this religious bypassing of somebody's real problems.
Yeah.
And you never see the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam doing this. It's interesting because you grow up seeing this in religious spaces from people who don piety upon themselves, but you read the Sirah and you never see the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with people coming to him with problems. And there were some real problems, amongst the Sahaba. There were problems of divorce, there were problems of, intimacy, there were problems of, anger, and you never see the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam just say, just deal with it, right? And even in the moments when he did tell people to have patience or to have taqwa, that was always supplementary. It was a comprehensive solution in which there was a ultra practical reality and then a spiritual medicative reality, right? So there was the time when the Prophet ﷺ told people, like, do this and then also maintain tawakkul on Allah, or do this and also have trust in Allah. So number one is we have to know the life of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And both sides, the people who are abusive have to use it as a remedy and a medication for their disease. And those who are being abused have to empower themselves with the knowledge of religion so that it can never be used against them. And I know that this sounds very, almost luxurious, like, oh, gaining knowledge in a time of being abused. This isn't about in the time of being abused. It's more so as preparation so that your religion that you hold near and dear to your heart can never be weaponized against you.
Yeah.
So that you know it well enough to tell somebody, I know that's not right. That the imam that's telling you to be patient, you can tell them that that's not correct, right? That my justice is being removed from me. That's number one. Number two is that we have to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the default in which he created everybody, regardless of even faith, regardless definitely of gender, regardless of heritage and skin color. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, that Allah Ta'ala said that he created all of us with dignity and honor. Thus, it is part of, in the tafsir of this ayah, it says that it's part of our duty as Muslims and as human beings to not take away what Allah gave us, right? That you're not allowed to remove what Allah bestowed upon somebody else. You're not allowed to do that. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave somebody dignity, as he said he did, then you would be a criminal to steal that dignity from them, to take away their honor, to take away their safety and their, their sense of self. And so this stigmatization of women who are abused, or even men who are abused, anyone who's abused, in this case, we're talking specifically about women, and also we're talking about, divorced women, divorcees, to remove their dignity and their honor by stigmatizing them and pushing them into a corner of fear is something that goes directly against, diametrically opposed to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted us to do. And so, number one, we have to empower ourselves. And number two, we have to realize the grave crime that we are committing if we perpetrate or if we propagate and perpetuate somebody doing this against somebody else.
Thank you so much. And that's beautiful. Obviously, the prophetic example is the one that we should be relying on as the most perfect one. If we're people that are trying to embody the religion and to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. I think it's really hard for a woman who has been psychologically brought down to a place where she can be struck over and over and over again to feel empowered. So, and yet the faith can empower us, right? Going back to that knowledge that can empower us. Ustadha Yasmin, what do you think would be the best way for someone to feel powerful? What are some of the avenues maybe that they could take when they are in the middle of an abusive situation, so that they can feel, hey, I know my religion, I know my rights, or I know that this is not right. I know that there's something better. And specifically, kind of the second part of that question is, so how can they empower themselves? And then the second part is, when you are divorced, how can you break against the fear of what's to come?
Great question. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. I just want to begin by saying what a crucial conversation this is. And if I could have this conversation from the highest mountain, I would. We have to settle with Facebook, etc. But this is such a crucial conversation because I, on a daily basis, see the amount of misinformation that we have perpetuated in our community. There is so much we have to unlearn. It's not actually just about learning now, it's about unlearning. There is so much misinformation under the guise of Islam, under the guise of being righteous, under the guise of well, this Maulana said or this person said, and it's called Islam. And that's what's so actually tragic, is that it isn't just that we have a blank slate that we're dealing with, but we're actually dealing with a massive amount of misinformation. And to answer your question about what can we do about it, well, step one is we have to unlearn. Step one is we have to unlearn the absolute misinformation, the myths that we have been taught, and literally we have to break the chains that have been put on us for far too long, under the name of Islam, under the name of religion. And I'll tell you what one of them is. One of them is an absolute abuse and misinformation, literally, and abuse of the concept of the word sabr, of the concept of sabr. It has been so abused, and I have seen countless women throughout the world, really, like unfortunately this is across cultures, where the concept of what sabr is has been abused. By and large, sabr has been taught as being essentially two things, right? On the one hand, it's being taught as being passive and doing nothing, right? That sabr means to turn the other cheek. That's a different religion, that's not Islam. Wrong religion there, right? Like wrong stop there. So we need to unlearn that concept of that sabr means to do nothing, that sabr means to be passive. I heard one woman say that her mom basically taught her that, or she said to her, you need to be able to drink poison and keep a smile on your face. So that kind of, in a nutshell, describes this cultural imperative, and then this label put on it called sabr. That's false. So that's the first thing we have to really unlearn. That sabr doesn't mean do nothing. It doesn't mean you drink poison with a smile on your face. It doesn't mean you turn the other cheek. But in fact, when you study what the scholars have said about the concept of sabr, yes, we need to have sabr. But do we realize that sabr is also an active concept? It is also to take action. So scholars say that sabr can be divided into three parts. You have to have sabr in order to withstand or to accept the decree of Allah that you can't change, right? That's a form of sabr. Absolutely. These are in things that you cannot change. So for example, if somebody passes away, in that regard, your sabr is that you accept the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without complaining against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which, by the way, isn't the same thing as complaining to Allah, but that's another discussion, right? So the idea here is that in that case, when you can't do anything about it, you accept it. That's sabr in that case. But when it is a case where you can do something about it, when it is in the case that requires action, then in that case, sabr actually, it's perseverance. It's to persevere and to take action. And of course, you also require sabr. The third category is to restrain oneself from that which Allah has prohibited. So you have, three different categories of sabr, and we only talk about one, which is in cases that we can't do anything about. Something that is the decree of Allah and we cannot change. And so we've taught people to be passive. And then lastly, I would say that one really, really important concept is that the Prophet ﷺ, and I really liked how Sheikh Murphy, you explained that that the Prophet ﷺ's example goes against these cultural narratives completely. And so one of them that I really, really think is important to understand is that the Prophet ﷺ told us that we should help our brother if he is the oppressor or he's oppressed. So the companions asked, well, how do we help? We know how to help him or her if he's oppressed, but what do we do when he is the oppressor? And the Prophet ﷺ, our Prophet, replied and said, by stopping him from oppressing. See, he's not telling us to drink poison and keep a smile on our face. He's not telling us turn the other cheek. He's not saying do nothing. He's saying take action against that oppressor and stop him or her, and that's how you help him or her.
Yeah, that is empowering. I mean, that's kind of empowerment in a nutshell. And I think, you know, my father who's coming to visit me just used that hadith yesterday to explain how important it is to have a galvanized community against what is wrong. And you know, what's really wonderful about Muslim Aid USA is that they're giving us a platform to do that. Every single person can feel empowered to empower someone else who is feeling so weak and so broken and so scared. And they can go to launchgood.com/DV to help promote and donate to these, you know, fantastic organizations that are there to pick up the shattered pieces. And I kind of do want to go back to this idea of fear of divorce, because I think people are really scared. They are like petrified. Even, you know, I myself went through a divorce, and I just remember being so scared, like just thinking about packing my things up was petrifying. Just the idea of, and then, you know, I had read the statistic that is the single most dangerous point for any domestic violence survivor is leaving. That leaving is this crazy, scary time, because that's when the perpetrator feels so out of control and wants to exert that control. So what I want to, you know, hear from either you, Ustad Yasmin, or you, Ustad AbdelRahman, is how can we fight this fear in a real way? Where do we turn? And how do we speak to Allah? How do we speak to God? But how do we speak to our neighbor about fighting this fear of being divorced and just the process of leaving?
I mean, I think I'll just briefly, you know, share one thing, and then I'll let, you know, Ustad Yasmin elaborate more, inshallah, and share more. One of the things that I feel is oftentimes just completely, I don't want to say ignored, because it's definitely there, but it's definitely not brought to the forefront of our conversations and our learning, are the tests that the prophets themselves went through. Alayhim as-salam. May Allah have peace and blessings and mercy upon all of them. You know, it's very interesting, subhanAllah, when you see this concept sometimes of how the prophets, alayhim as-salam, were tested beyond even what, you know, normal people would ever consider themselves to be tested with. You know, multiple of them losing their children. You know, the Prophet ﷺ held, you know, his own grandson in his hands as he was coughing. His son was coughing, you know, his last and passing away, just a year or so old, almost 2 years old, and he shed tears and cried. Prophet Nuh alayhi salam loses his son after begging him to join him on his ship, right? Yes. You know, come with us. You can almost feel the yearning of a father trying to call his son. And you look at all these scenarios, and you see Maryam alayhi salam, who obviously, you know, we know is not a prophet, but is still a distinct, designated, honored figure in our tradition, mentioned in the Quran, entire surah named after her, a role model for men and women alike. And she literally is you know, begging for relief from this, to the point where she even begs for death, right? And so what's the lesson in all of this? The lesson in all of this is that it is part of the sunnah of Allah to push people to their limit, so that they can discover new frontiers about themselves. And at that limit is the most uncertain, uncomfortable, unknown about where and what happens next. If you look at all of these individuals, Yunus in the belly of the whale, Nuh, you know, in his ship calling his son, the Prophet ﷺ sitting in the cave with Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, waiting, not knowing what Medina is going to be like, not knowing if they'll ever get there. All of these moments were filled with uncertainty. And at that moment is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like, uplifted them into, again, a new phase. And so it's not easy. It's not easy for any one individual to sit there and say, oh yeah, you know what? This is my moment of growth. This is where things are going to get better. This is where I'm going to turn the corner. But there's a reason these stories are there, right? There's a reason these stories are there. So that's number one. Number two is the active part, which is a community support system.
Yeah.
There was a sister in our community who was unfortunately going through abuse for years at the hands of her husband. And she, again, stayed, and everybody, you know, the novice question is, why stay? Why wouldn't you go somewhere? But the more important question is, where should she go? Right?
Right.
Is she being told, not with platitudes like, oh, we're here for you, but like genuinely, is she being
like, here's my home.
here's my car. Here's my car. I'm going to leave it on the corner of the street. The keys are here. Okay. I want you to when you're ready, get in the car and drive to my house. The room is ready. Your kids will be here. Like and this girl, this woman, she did not leave until another person in the community that was helping the situation, until that setup was literally provided, car and everything.
Yeah.
Right. So it's easy for us to sit here and imagine and become almost like, wow, you know, in abstract, why would they stay? Right. It's an incredibly naive and novice question to ask when you wonder, where would they go? Where should she go? What should she do? In those situations, there is so much that is blinded on the horizon of an individual packing up their things, trying to leave, that you have to literally answer all of those questions for them. Your residence is taken care of. Your bills will be taken care of. Your food, your kids' school. We've thought about this. We set up play dates for them already.
Yes.
Don't worry about it. We have a counselor on standby. This. We've already
job training, a career.
We've already exactly. We've already gotten a few different leads for different positions that you could apply for.
Right.
Don't worry about it. We're going to get through this. We're going to get through this. And this is what we call a support system. Right. And so number one is you need the divine support of Allah through the Quran, telling you that people that you're following, they're a great example. They got through it. You will too. But then you also need your family and friends and community behind you, telling you you're going to get through it too. And those languages are two very different languages. Allah gives us wahi, and the friends and community have to give everything.
That's
right? They have to give their money and themselves.
That's right.
And this kind of support. And when this does happen, when it happens, it transforms.
And that's exactly what we can all do from our computers. So simple at launchgood.com/DV to help Muslim Aid USA's brave stance in a global campaign against domestic violence, to give people that hope, to give people that ability to have a plan, because there are organizations that are working hard to create those plans. I was thinking about Glennon Doyle, and she has this book called, I think it's called The Untamed Spirit. But anyway, she says in there, well, if you're too scared, if you're just like paralyzed by fear, do it scared. Just do it scared. And I was thinking about that when I was leaving, my home, and I just left my things because I was so petrified to pack my things. I just left my things. But the only reason I was able to do that is because I had a support structure. I had my brother there. He said, whatever things you buy, you can rebuy, but your life is worth way more than that. So let all that just melt away. And the like you said, those prophetic examples that are there to see that people took that leap of faith, that they did things when they were petrified, when they were scared, and they had a huge expansion. When they made hijrah, they had to leave their things. They did. People thought when you left Mecca and went to Medina, all the Sahaba like packed their things and got a pod and it filled it up and then they sent it there. No, they left everything. In fact, they left their homes and everything they knew. That's how the Quraysh were able to take all that stuff and sell it. Yes. That's what led to the Battle of Badr, was that they kept selling someone else's property. That's right. So powerful. They had to just leave. Right. And it's hard. It's hard, but we're hoping that we can, as a community, come together to offer someone another alternative, another chance. So Sadia, Yasmin, I'd love to hear your response, and how can we push past this fear? How can we help people not feel so scared and paralyzed by that fear?
Right, absolutely. I think it's really a two-prong approach, right? I mean, on the one hand, we have to empower the individual. We have to empower the woman, in this case, the victim, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's its own, that's its own sort of subject, and that's a very, very important part of the equation. How do we empower the individual? How do we empower the victim? Well, I think one of the most powerful ways to give someone that strength is to connect that person to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So at an individual level, we have to really teach the concept of tawakkul, the concept of trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I appreciated the mention of the stories of the prophets, peace be upon them, because it's exactly why we're told these stories, is that they're an inspiration and a lesson for us, and they're timeless, right? They don't have an expiration date, but they're just as relevant today as they were at the time. And that's because there's a human experience, right? And that is that we as human beings, we go through, we have a shared experience. We feel fear. We go through, abuse. We go through, alienation. These are things that are not only relevant in a specific time. So we can connect to their stories, and we can get inspiration of how they put their trust in Allah. And there is so much that we can get from that. I mean, I personally, when I was going through a lot of difficult times in my life, one of the things, and probably people who've listened to me before at some point know about this story, is that I personally got so much empowerment from the story of Musa alayhi salam in front of the Red Sea. And the reason for that is that we have these Red Sea moments in our lives. We have these moments where we're afraid. And one thing that's really deep about the story of Musa alayhi salam is that Allah is consistently talking about his fear. He wasn't a robot, right? We were, these prophets were human beings. They were not angels. They were human, and they felt human emotion. And I think it's really interesting that actually Musa alayhi salam, one of the consistent themes with him is the theme of fear, right? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking to him, and when Allah is sending him on his task, really difficult task, to face, the worst tyrant that walked the earth, right? Pharaoh. And so this is a heavy task, right? So Musa alayhi salam felt fear. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is consistently addressing that. He's taking into account that fear, and he's comforting Musa alayhi salam. He's telling him, "La takhafa," right? Don't be afraid. Innani ma'akuma. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling him, I am with you, and I'm hearing and I'm seeing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is comforting him, but he's acknowledging that fear, that it's a natural, human emotion. But look at what happens when he's standing in front of the Red Sea, right? He's now in a and the reason I really find so much inspiration in the story, and I have personally, is that it looks like an impossible situation, right? And it looks like he's trapped. And I think so many people, especially victims of domestic violence and abuse, have had that moment where they feel trapped, where they feel no way, where they see no way out. فَلَمَّا تَرَاءَ الْجَمْعَانِ قَالَ أَصْحَابُ مُوسَى إِنَّا لَمُدْرَكُونَ. That when Musa alayhi salam and the people who are with Musa see the army of Pharaoh, they see each other, right? So now the people of Musa are starting to despair, and they're like, we're going to be overtaken, right? And then you see Musa alayhi salam's response. Now, even though he was human and he had normal human emotion, right, of fear at times, there were times that he was afraid. But look at his response. قَالَ كَلَّا. He said, no, by no means will we be overtaken. And this is the inspiration for people who feel trapped, is that he says, قَالَ كَلَّا إِنَّ مَعِيَ رَبِّي سَيَهْدِينِ. That is the reason he wasn't afraid. It wasn't because he's really strong, or he had his staff, or he had his people. It was for one reason, and that is, indeed, my Lord is with me, and he'll get me through this. And that is the type of tawakkul that saves us. That is the type of tawakkul that saves us, is to have that understanding and that conviction that Allah is with you, and he will get you through this. So at an individual level, that's essential. And of course, we know that at that point, and this is also very important to note in the story, is that Musa alayhi salam is asked to take an action. I cannot emphasize enough the need to take action in these situations. Tawakkul does not mean that I do nothing. Tawakkul does not mean that I sit. Because if you look at the story of Musa alayhi salam, he was told to take an action. And he had tawakkul, but Allah told him to take an action. And that in this case was to strike the sea with his staff. That was his tying of the camel, right? Because we're told by the Prophet ﷺ, "I'qilha wa tawakkal." Tie your camel and at the same time put your trust in Allah. So we have to go back to understanding this balance of tawakkul with action. We can't say I have my trust in Allah, I'm just going to sit at home and do nothing about it, because that's not what the righteous examples did. Musa alayhi salam took an action, and that was striking the sea, but it was Allah who saved him. Right? Yes. It was Allah who saved him. And in this case, he saved him in a miraculous way. He opened the sea for him. When you look at the story of Hajar, same thing. Hajar, she had total tawakkul. We know that she called out to Ibrahim alayhi salam, is it Allah who told you? And as soon as she knew it was Allah who was commanding this, she had tawakkul. But she didn't sit. She didn't stay laying down. She didn't sit. She got up and she strove, she ran between Safa and Marwa. This action that she took is called sa'i, because it means to strive. And she didn't do it once. And this is very deep. She did it not twice, not 3 times. She did it 7 times. And that's also very important, that sometimes we won't see results immediately. Yes. We won't see the result immediately. So she repeated the same action 7 times before she was safe, before the action, or before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened for her, in this case, the Zamzam, the water coming out of the sand. What do these stories have in common? A few things. Number 1, tawakkul, essential. Number 2, action. Yeah. And number 3, that Allah made a way out for them from places they never imagined. And that leads me to my final point with regards to, the individual empowerment. And that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, see, there's certain barriers that we have when it comes to, as you mentioned, this fear of leaving the situation, what comes next, the fear of uncertainty. People are very afraid of uncertainty. And that's what tawakkul is about, right? Because Musa alayhi salam had no idea how he's going to get out of that situation, but he had total trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So tawakkul comes when we don't know the outcome and when we don't see a way out, and we have to have trust in the unseen, right? That's one of the most essential parts of our iman. Ladina amanu, or where in Surah Al-Baqarah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that those who believe in the unseen, right? Alif lam mim dhalika al-kitabu la rayba fihi hudan lil muttaqin alladhina yu'minuna bil ghayb. That's one of the first requirements, is that we have to believe in the unseen. We have to be able to put our trust on something that we can't see. We can't always think that we know the way, but we have to be able to put our trust even when we don't know what that way is. And the ayah that I wanna mention finally is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَل لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. So interestingly enough, this ayah where Allah tells us, whoever has taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this concept of taqwa, putting Allah first, right? Having consciousness of God, that Allah makes a way out for that person. I think this is one of the big fears, when someone is in a bad situation and they don't see a way out. Allah promises that He makes a way out for that person. And I think the other fear a lot of times has to do with provision. Where will I go? How will I live? What will happen? It's a lot of uncertainty that has to do with provision. And next, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيَرْزُقُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. And He will provide for that person from places that he never imagined. And this is, interestingly enough, in Surah what? At-Talaq. It's ayah 2 and 3 of the chapter on divorce, of the chapter called divorce. So it is, I think, it's very important that we have that empowerment at an individual level, and it can only happen through tawakkul, right? And finally, in this own discussion, the second, part of this approach is that the community needs to provide support. The community needs to have safe spaces. And that's why I wanted to come on this, and I wanted to support this effort, because that's exactly what Muslim Aid USA is doing, is that they're creating a safe space. They're supporting a safe space, because we can tell women, like Ustad Mercy said, we can tell women, why are you staying, or why don't you just leave? But if they don't have that support, it becomes very, very difficult. And it is upon us as a community to provide that support. Because I've also found that a woman can leave, but it's also difficult to stay away. I've found a lot of women, even when it's just, a very toxic relationship, whether the person is a narcissist or whatever it is, well, they're professionals at trying to, bring that person back, at manipulating that person. So even when a woman leaves, what I found is one of the hardest things is to stay away if she doesn't have that support, that support.
And when she leaves, it's the beginning of her healing. It's a long road. And that's why it's really important to come together as a community, and so easy for you to support these efforts that Muslim Aid USA is leading at launchgood.com/DV in honor of Domestic Violence Awareness Month here in October, to come together and say, how can we provide the services that are needed to rebuild a life, to allow for the healing to take hold, and to, like you said, Yasmin, so beautifully, to not have her go back, because it's what they know. It's attractive. They've had a whole set of, years in a relationship, controlling the situation, making the person feel dependent on them. That's a big part of the psychological breakdown. And, in abusive relationships, the person makes the other person feel like they can't even trust their own reasoning. Like the psychological torture that happens in domestic violence is that the abuser makes the other person uncertain, be on uncertain footing at all times, to trust their own judgment. And that is sort of the leaving, that's going to be one of the most important things to rebuild over time, to trust. And, and I was just thinking about what you said about Surah Al-Talaq, and divorce, and specifically the stigma that we have in our community about divorce. You also mentioned this, Ustad AbdelRahman, when you were saying that, people are told, like, divorce is the thing that's most hated. It's not, you should absolutely not go down that path. It's the thing that shakes the throne of Allah. I mean, people use religion a lot to, basically spread this idea that divorce is somehow the most hated, and something that, is as close to haram as you can possibly get it. My question to you is, how can we help people who are kind of thinking about divorce because the situation is very abusive or very toxic at home, to know that there is a fluidity of marriage and relationships within the history of Islam, and that divorce was never haram. And in fact, there's an entire chapter, as you said, Yasmin, that's dedicated to it in the Quran.
Is this for myself or Ustad Yasmin?
It's for you.
So Sheikh Abdel Nasser, my teacher and one of the teachers at the seminary, Qalam Seminary, always brings up it's such an important point, especially to our students of Islamic sciences. And that is that if you cannot differentiate between what is general and what is specific, what is universal and what is exceptional, then you have really no right applying any of the religious texts. So the Quran and Hadith are filled with different kinds of resources and references. And there is an incredible context to every single one of them, quite literally.
Yes.
And some of them even more vast than others, because the context that is supporting this verse or this hadith has instance or instances behind it that guide what the intent or what the direction of that reference was. So you might come across a hadith in which the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said something about a marriage, or the kind of marital relationship, an ideal in a marital relationship. And he may have been speaking to a specific Sahabi or Sahabiya about their particular marriage.
Yeah.
Right? There were numerous companions that came to the Prophet ﷺ asking, what are the best deeds that we can do? And he gave each individual one different answers. So what, does that mean that the Prophet ﷺ was contradicting himself? Does that mean that he doesn't know, he doesn't have a good memory, he can't remember what no, of course not. This is the Prophet ﷺ talking to this person. And there are literally like PhD level, post PhD level studies and research, dissertations that go on talking about the different chains of narration and the companions that were there, and trying to really build the image of what the conversation was. So whenever anyone talks about, divorce in Islam, and they mention some of the perils of divorce or some of the possible problems of divorce, they are ignoring that these are exceptional references. Some of them, by the way, the authenticity of them is disputed in essence, but let's not disrespect, because there is a place even for weak hadith in Islam. Let's not take it away completely. You're still ignoring the fact that this does not support the entire corpus of the Islamic tradition.
Right.
That you had companions, men and women, who were getting divorced, and you didn't once have the Prophet ﷺ tell them, no, why are you doing this? Don't you know?
Right.
This is Allah's most hated thing.
Right.
You're telling me that the people who loved Allah enough to give their entire wealth away for the sake of Islam, gardens and gardens in the desert, you're talking about companions who had gardens in deserts and they were giving it away. You're telling me that they wouldn't be able to stick it out in a marriage for the sake of Allah's pleasure? What does that tell you? It tells you that there are notions and cultural, phrases and cultural sort of like idioms and cliches that we throw around,
right,
that are not universals, right? And that are being applied universally, again, to the detriment of people.
Yeah.
People are being guilted and gaslit to stay in the toxic environment that they are being, repeatedly, exposed to. And why? For some sake, for some, and again, people, I don't think I've ever met somebody who says, do it for the sake of Allah, and they genuinely mean for the sake of Allah. What they're typically saying is, you're going to embarrass us. This is going to be a huge issue. Who's going to marry you again? Blah, 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 all these things. And they're trying to wrap that up with the bow of
religion.
Exactly. And that's where this becomes a weaponized resource that we have to complete. We have to, in self-defense, when they teach you how to disarm somebody.
Yes.
Right. That's one of the most important things a person can know, is that if a person has a weapon, whether it's like a knife or even a gun, that they'll teach you how to disarm them or take away the threat of that weapon. Okay, grab the wrist and turn it this way or do that. We have to learn how to do that, like Ustad Yasmin said, with our own faith.
Yeah.
I have to learn that you can't use that against me, because I know when and where that verse was revealed. I know what the Prophet ﷺ was saying. I know that when the verse says, وَضْرِبُهُنَّ, that it doesn't mean to beat them. I know that because I've studied it and you haven't studied it.
Right.
I'm going to stop you right there, right? And I'm going to tell you that you can't use that anymore. That's not what that means. So don't use my faith against me in that way. So I would say, to this point, that it's incredibly important for us to be able to, as a community, deconstruct some of these false notions.
Yeah.
In public spaces, like on videos, like in books, in literature, in different content and media, so that it's not just whispers. Well, I heard that's not actually what it was. And I heard there needs to be actual academic content being produced, even live streams like today, that help give people the sense of strength and confidence to know that this is not what their religion says.
And when someone, does divorce, especially if they have children, and especially if they came from a situation that was either abusive or like you said, Yasmin, with somebody who was a narcissist or highly manipulative, or, emotionally abusive, whatever, so, you have to co-parent with that person. And so, after the divorce, you're learning how to navigate co-parenting with someone that is toxic, is problematic in many ways. What do you think that we can do to support people in knowing that,
Absolutely. I think that on the topic of stigma, it's really important to clarify. And I think that Ustad Murphy mentioned a lot of really important points about for example, what the text says and the authenticity. And while I definitely respect the concept, sometimes, even weak hadith, the idea that there is even, sometimes people consider that as well. But one thing I really think needs to be clarified is this. I think when it comes to the discussion about divorce, unfortunately, I feel that there is an agenda. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
I feel that, when we talk about other topics in Islam, and there's no agenda about it. If we talk about, I don't know, whether or not this particular type of meat is allowed, or this, the certain fiqhi issues, when we discuss it, and if we don't have an agenda, it's very straightforward. But there's something when it comes to discussing divorce, seems to be a clear agenda. And what I mean by that is this. I'll give you data points of why I feel this. Typically, when we discuss fiqhi issues, typically as a community, and I'm not talking about within the circles of the students of knowledge. I'm talking about when we're talking to the general public. Typically, we have a hierarchy in the way we teach. Number one, we typically use the Quranic mention of a topic as the first, that's sort of that takes precedence when we discuss. When we discuss that specific topic, we will first teach the awam, we'll teach the crowd, the group, we'll teach the general public. Well, here's what the Quran says about this topic, and that kind of becomes public knowledge, right? And then after that, typically we'll go to the authentic hadith. We'll go to the Sahih, Bukhari and Muslim and etc. Basically the hadith and the examples from the Sirah which are authenticated, which are very sound. And then maybe not at all do we generally teach the weak narrations. Now, when it comes to divorce, it's completely upside down. Upside down. What we do is we actually, if you look at what we have taught at a sort of a general sort of general ed on divorce, we teach the weak hadith and we forget the Quran. And I'll tell you why. The hadith that everyone knows, there's basically two, right? The hadith that everyone knows is abghadul halali ilallah. Right? That it is the most hated of the halal to Allah. Right. That hadith is weak. That hadith is weak. Now, okay, that's fine. We want to have a discussion. But this becomes the general ed with regards to the subject, right? Another hadith which is widely discussed is that if a woman asks for divorce without a valid reason, she will not smell paradise. There's another widely... This one has been graded by some scholars as fabricated. Again, general ed.
That one was weaponized against me in my divorce.
Of course it has.
By the imam that was in charge of my divorce.
Yeah, you're not the only one. You're not the only one. There could be a support group around the world where this hadith became, you'd think this, so this became general ed. So far, what's our general ed on the topic? A weak hadith and a fabricated hadith. Now, nobody seems to know what the Quran says about divorce. Right. It's very disingenuous. It's very disingenuous the way we're teaching, and there's a clear agenda, because now let's get to what the Quran says about divorce. Well, Surah Al-Baqarah, things like la junaha alayhim. What? How does that fit with the general ed that we're giving about divorce? La junaha alayhim means there is no blame on them.
Right.
You hear that and you can't imagine that that phrase is in the same sentence with something to do with divorce. But this is God's words. And unfortunately, no one knows it, because there is an agenda when it comes to talking about this very, very sort of sensitive topic. Okay. And unfortunately, we have to start being more honest, and we have to start being more sincere to okay, let's use the same methodology that we would teach about any fiqhi issue to the general public. We talk about Quran first, then we talk about the Sahih Hadith next, and usually we don't even discuss weak Hadith when discussing general education about a topic. All right. And so here we have it, upside down. And when you look at the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about divorce in the Quran, you'll notice that in Surah Al-Baqarah, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasizes taqwa, right? And it's interesting because Allah is talking about, it's like Allah talks about taqwa, having consciousness of Allah, having fear of Allah. And it's kind of like, it's in the middle of the ayat about divorce. And you would wonder, like, well, what's the connection, right? I'm talking about taqwa, and then you're talking about rules about divorce. Well, they're very much connected, because unfortunately, when a person is going through divorce, before, during, and after, this is when their taqwa is really, really tested, and we start to see people's, the nasty side of people can come out, and they might pray, and they might pray at the masjid, they might fast, but when it comes to divorce, there's no rules, and there's absolutely no boundaries, and one of the ways that this is weaponized is, and I want to mention this because it's very important on this topic, is the alienation of the child against the other parent. This is a crime. This is a crime, and unfortunately, it can come hand in hand with, especially if someone has been victimized, and it can become quite difficult. But this is where taqwa comes in. This is where taqwa comes in. And also, this is where we have to educate that it's the child who suffers when you alienate them from the other parent. You might think you're getting your ex back, but unfortunately, you're using your child as the weapon. And so your child suffers first and foremost before anyone else suffers. So these are some of the things so when Allah talks about divorce in the Quran, He's talking to us about how to do it in a way that is with taqwa. And even beyond, exactly, and even beyond that, one other concept that we have in Surah Al-Baqarah, which no one even thinks about or discusses, is tasrihun bi ihsan. Tasrihun bi ihsan literally means to part, or to part, or to let go with ihsan. I mean, we can't even think of these two concepts in the same sentence, to divorce and ihsan at the same time. Like ihsan means to do something in a beautiful fashion, meaning not in an ugly, not like
vindictive, petty.
Exactly. To do it in so what is Allah telling us? Allah has made it halal. Allah does not in any way curse the person who gets divorced. Allah does not belittle the person who gets divorced. And in fact, Allah says there's no blame on, those who decided in the ayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is discussing in Surah Al-Baqarah, that there's no blame on them. But the blame comes when people do it in an ugly way, when people do it with no rules of engagement, when people start using the children to go against the other parent, when people start to be unjust. It's not the divorce itself, because Allah has made it halal, but it's the way in which people, go about this process.
I mean, that's beautifully said, and there's a lot of legal ramifications for divorce, and what Muslim Aid USA is doing with the different programs that it's supporting both internationally and domestically is helping people have the access to the legal means that necessary to be able to exit with ihsan, and to do so in a way that is just, to do so in a way that protects the children, to do so in a way that is really having the best interest of the child at play and at heart. And you can go to www.launchgood.com/DV to support these initiatives by Muslim Aid USA to combat the difficulty that a lot of divorced women, especially with children, face when they are exiting a abusive situation, and there is no ihsan, and it's not being done beautifully. And so how can we as a community respond We're just finishing out, our discussion here, and I want to kind of ask a final couple questions for you, Ustad Abdulrahman, and then I'll give you the final word to you, Ustad Yasmin. I want to ask, what do you think, Ustad Abdulrahman, would be the best way for us to prepare? Like, if there is going to be a divorce, if it exists in our community, what do you think is the best way for people to prepare? And then finally, kind of, what made you want to talk about this topic? And if you've seen any examples that you want to share within your own community, if you could do it in a couple minutes, that would be great. Especially one that was hopeful, that you saw somebody divorced in a way that was not shattering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the first question is really important, and it's interesting because you see that in every realm of life, buying a house, buying a car, getting a job, you have to do things that prepare you mentally and legally to be ready for unknown and unintended scenarios.
Yes.
Okay, so before you buy a car, before they let you take it, you have to show some proof of insurance. Okay, why do you have to have insurance? I mean, you don't hope that you're going to get into an accident. Nobody aspires or yearns to get into an accident.
Right.
Okay, but it's illegal to drive without insurance because we need you to be prepared. That in the case that something happens, you do have protection for you, your belongings, your life, your health, any medical costs or expenses. Same with buying a home. When you're signing a contract for employment,
right,
there are clauses in that contract that deal with what if this goes south.
Right, the contingency.
And exactly. And contracts are not fun. Are you a lawyer, Yasmin? You're a lawyer.
I
right?
am.
Okay. So contracts are not fun because, again, they deal with worst case scenarios.
Right.
Okay. And whenever anyone gets a job, they're always like, I'm so, people are excited about their work. They're excited about that. I don't want to just sign. But they don't focus that there are clauses in there that you have to make sure you understand, whether it's severance, whether it's, how you leave, whether it's how much notice you have to give, whether it's how much are you at will as an employee,
exactly.
or, all these things. Yeah.
Right. That's what you're right. So
we don't bat an eye, right? As a community, if someone walked into a masjid and said, I just got a job, we said, mashallah, where? And they said, here. Okay, show us your contract. I don't have a contract. Why don't you have a contract? They promised me they'd pay me, so I'm going to show up. And we'd say, brother, sister, come on, you have to get it together, right? I'm driving my car, driving my kids to school. Right. I don't have car insurance. I don't really care. What do you mean, right? I just bought this house, no insurance, not going to take care of it. Just everyone would be shocked. People would privately pull that person to the side and say, you need to get it together.
Right.
Okay. But when it comes to marriage, when it comes to the process of getting married, very few people go through the prenuptial agreement process, the contractual process, in order to prepare themselves, again, for unintended consequences. Okay, these are the things that might happen. We have to talk about that. It's not a fun conversation. Any premarital counseling that I do, I always tell the couple, look, I know you guys are seeing stars right now, and that's good. You should see stars right now. You should be absolutely and totally excited. Yeah. Right? It's not abnormal for you to be excited right now. You're an engaged couple. You're getting married, inshallah, soon, few months, whatever. It's good. You should be excited, right? A lot of people say, don't be excited. Love is built over time. No, it's good to be excited, right?
Yes.
But we need to have kind of a reality check conversation about what you two are prepared to do if this doesn't work out. And you need to structure that exit plan right now. And hopefully you never have to use it. But if you do, it has to be ready.
Yeah.
Okay. And that conversation is how I personally try to prepare young people or old people, however they might be, right? Everyone's young, mashallah, right? So all young people, as they're stepping into their marriage, whether it's their first, second, however many marriages. So number one is that we have to normalize and make normal the preparation for, in the contractual process of getting married. I'm stunned when people ask me to do the nikah and they're like, we don't have a contract. I'm stunned. I actually now have gotten to the point where I tell people, I will not do your nikah unless you have a contract. I can't.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be like, the Pope walking in, blessing you, and then leaving. Like, that's just not how it works, right? No disrespect to the Pope.
Yeah.
But I can't do that because I can't sleep at night when I see that 3 months later, 6 months later, 12 months later, it didn't work out. And I know, no one else knows, I know neither of you are protected financially. You're not protected legally, right? And I don't know what's going on. So, number one, in our communities, we have to normalize, as families, as imams, as potential spouses, we have to normalize the prenuptial agreement. We have to make sure that both individuals that are getting married know their rights and know their processes that protect them and that give them a strategy. Okay, that's number one. And number two is that we have to have divorce education as part of our marriage education.
Yes.
Right? I saw one time at a church, it was amazing. I was driving in Memphis, Tennessee, and I saw a banner outside of a church that said, "The plan." It was like an amazing banner. It said, "The plan." And then underneath it, it said, 8 weeks to post-divorce recovery. And it looked like, based off that banner, it was like an 8-week session.
Yeah.
And so that was a lot. That was like 12 years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
And I was like a youth director back then. I wasn't really focusing much on like families. It was more so like young, teens and college students. But I always remembered that in my head, like, wow, man, like they're so like one step ahead that they're not even, Muslims are still just having constant marriage sessions all the time. Again, it's not a bad thing, right? People want to get married. I support that, right? I'm not trying to hate on Yasmin, Yas Guru, right? Constant marriage session. But when are we going to start talking about not only divorce, but divorce recovery, right?
Yeah.
The process of divorce recovery, divorce
healing.
Protocol,
right.
Healing, and also the process of it.
You're right.
Like when two people decide they don't want to be married anymore, what do I do now? Like what even happens, right?
Right.
And so, and that's where a lot of things can go south because there's no guidance.
Yes.
And that's when the pettiness starts to arise, and that's when the emotions from both sides start to take over. And that's when, if things are not protected, that's when really, really horrific things can happen. So we at Roots in Dallas have built into our programming plan for this year, inshallah, a circle for people who are going through divorce.
Wonderful.
So that there can be conversation. Now, when I tried to do this at certain Islamic institutions before, we got this typical, you're encouraging divorce.
How did I know that's what it was?
Have a support group.
You're encouraging divorce by having a support group. So that's why we started Roots in the first place, right? So we say Jazakumullah khairan, make dua for us, Jazakumullah khair. We pray Fajr at the masjid, Jazakumullah khair, and we leave, right? And we do our things because it's important that while we're not encouraging divorce, we're also not discouraging it for people who need it.
Right.
Right? We're not encouraging it for people who don't. We're not walking around saying, your marriage looks great, I think you guys should end it. Like, that's not what's happening. But
no one walks around being like, I need some encouragement.
Yeah. And you know what's crazy?
Exactly.
You know what's crazy?
I want my life to dissolve. Like,
you know what's crazy? There are people that have thought they wanted to get a divorce, have come to some of these conversations and have decided, you know what? No.
I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I'm not saying that that's our goal. That's not our goal.
Right.
We actually don't have we don't have a goal. Our goal is just to provide content, right? So you have the goal. But we had people that actually, it did the opposite of what people feared. They came in and they're like, oh my goodness. Okay, you know what? We're going to go to therapy. And we're going to see, because we haven't gone to therapy. And everyone there was like, you need to go to therapy before you make this decision.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Everyone was like, you guys need to talk to somebody.
Yeah, they need to hear
don't
that.
Just get divorced. You don't just wake up one day and say, I don't think we should be married. You need to at least go speak to somebody for a couple sessions, right?
So true. Yes.
And work things out. And they were like, oh, okay. And again, not our intent, but it's just the way that things work. That's the point of community. Right. So I think, number one, we have to make normal the idea that before you get married, you do have to have a walk through that. You have to take a walk through that park of, okay, what does the divorce look like?
Yeah.
And again, hopefully, inshallah, you end up being stronger after having that conversation. It's not something that rattles you and scares you, but it's something that actually shows you how beautiful this religion is, that it like Ustad Yasmin said, it prepares you to handle this with trust and with beauty and At the same time, we also need to make sure that people who are in the process of thinking about and of getting divorces, that they are supported, right, in their process, and that it's not made, that they're not made to feel like they are doing something wrong, right? But they have a space to talk and to operate and to bounce ideas off of somebody or people in the community that hold the same values that they do, that love Allah and His Messenger like they do,
right?
So that they can make sure they get a bullseye when they throw that dart, right? Because right now, you know, we're tying people's arms behind their back and saying, throw the dart. And that's why people are getting hurt.
Right.
You know, we need to support people in that process, inshallah. So educate, make it normal, give people spaces to be able to talk about it. And just like we've been talking about this whole time, supporting efforts like Muslim Aid. Because, you know, and I say this a lot. I say this about Islamic Relief. I say this about, you know, Helping Hand. I say this about every organization. I always say that, look, you can't do what they're doing, okay? I got 2 kids. I got things I'm doing. Ustadh Yasmin's got things she's doing. Yasmin Elhady's got things she does. So none of us can do the work of an organization.
Yeah.
We all want the work to be done. All of us want the work to be done, but we can't do it, right? I have to go home right now and put my son to sleep, right? I'm using the internet at somebody else's house because mine's not working, right? So I got to go home and tuck Musa into bed and read him stories about monster trucks for 6 hours before he
Mine was screaming outside. He was supposed to sleep by his daddy. Nope.
So what can you do then? If you want this work to be done, and then someone says, can you do it? And you say, I'd love to, but I can't. You have to donate.
Yes.
You have to donate.
And look how simple it is. Launchgrid.com/DV.
If you think this is something that needs to be done, raise your hand. If you think this work needs to be done, raise your hand. I think it needs to be done.
Come on,
you do it? Can you do it effectively? Can you do it effectively? If you can do it effectively, raise your hand. We're all kind of like sitting here. Okay. What can you do then to make sure it's done effectively? Is that whatever Allah has given you, you give. It's a very beautiful equation. And it's very simple. And then, Allah will never decrease your wealth from your charity. So now you're giving charity, and as you give it, you're not losing. Well, I have a game for everybody. Okay, everyone who's watching right now, I don't know how many people are watching. Everyone who's watching,
we have over 500 watching worldwide. 531.
I have. It's not a game. It's actually serious. I shouldn't have called it a game. This is a real thing. Wallahi, it's a real thing. I want everyone to go donate right now. Go to launchgood.com/DV. Go and donate. However much you can, give a little bit more. So if you think I can give 50, give 75. If you think I can give 100, give 150. Just give a little bit more. It's fine. Trust me. I'll tell you why. Whenever you give, Wallahi al-azim. My mother's Egyptian. Wallahi al-azim thalatha. All right? I swear to God, you will get it back. I swear to God. I guarantee it. I personally guarantee you'll get it back. I cannot tell you.
You actually will get it increased.
Yes.
It'll come back increased.
That's
من حيث لا يحتسب.
Yeah.
Can I tell you guys how many stories, how many times I've done this to test it, literally with the intention of, I kind of want to see how Allah is going to get me back. And it's amazing. There was a brother one time, there was a brother that wanted a nice backpack, like a tech backpack. And I also wanted it. Wallahi, I said, you know what? I'm going to buy it for him. We bought it. I bought it for him. And then the company sent me 2. I emailed them and I said, hey, you guys sent me 2. They said, go ahead and keep the second one. I'm not making this up. You can't make this up.
Yasmin Elhady has a cool story like that. I was very moved by your story.
Literally happens all the time. Now, that one's not emotional. It's just a backpack. But I'm just telling you that this is how it works. So go to launchgood.com/DV. This is the last thing I'm going to say. Go to launchgood.com/DV.
That's so beautiful. I don't want to take any time with my story, maybe for another day, but Ustadh Yasmin, I want to give you the final word. Whatever you want to share with us about how we can prepare for divorce, and then also if you have any stories of hope that you want to maybe end the night with, that you've seen people divorce in really like not shattering ways, but ways that are productive and with ihsan.
Okay, Bismillah. First of all, I think your story is very deep and very powerful, and I'm just going to give a really abridged version of it from what I remember. But basically, I think it was a Suraj Wahaj, was it?
Yes.
So she went to a fundraiser and the person giving the fund, you know, who was doing the fundraising appeal, I think it was Siraj Wahaj, Sheikh Siraj Wahaj, and he was basically saying, you know, give everything, give what you have, Allah will give back. So this girl, she got pumped, and mashallah, she you know, she put her money where her mouth was. Is that even what people, anyway, because I don't know if it's the right thing, but so the point is, so the point is that she actually went ahead and she gave, you gave like some crazy, I don't know,
$1,000, which was crazy because I was 16, turning 17.
You were 16. Okay, she was a teenager. She gave $1,000. I was so moved by this story. So because she actually felt what he was saying and she believed it, so she gave like this huge amount, but like all the money she had saved probably. And I was blown away because you got a full ride to law school, didn't you?
I did.
That's so deep.
So literally, I mean, it took me a year and a half to pay off that $1,000 donation. And he told us to give until it hurt, until we broke our
I remember.
You know, broke our fear. And I'm like, I am broke. What does he mean? You know, and it took me a year and a half. And alhamdulillah, that $1,000 donation turned into hundreds of thousands of dollars in return. It's incredible.
SubhanAllah. I mean, nobody gets a full ride to law, so that just doesn't happen. And that's what happened to Yasmin, SubhanAllah. So it's actually not just it is a miracle. And I was actually really, really touched by that story because it's real. And so the idea that we get afraid to give because I don't have, it's actually completely a myth, because when you give, you are given back by the most generous. You know, it's not like you give me and I give you back. You know what I mean? I'm just a human being, right? We're just humans. But it's Allah who's giving back, and He's Al-Kareem. He's the most generous. He's the source of all generosity that exists. So when Allah gives back, He doesn't just give back. He multiplies, you know, and He gives with ihsan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, you know, ahsin kama ahsan Allahu ilayk. Like, I always get moved by that ayah, because Allah gives us, should we not give to others? And it's just like, if Allah has given you something and Allah has blessed you, should you not give to others as Allah has given to you? You know, and it's such an important, powerful concept. And I cannot emphasize enough how much it transforms people's lives. When you start to have an open hand to helping others, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be open in helping you. And that's the principle. Like, it's such a powerful, oft repeated principle in our text, that however we are with the creation, the creator is with us. And you're going to see that again and again and again in the Quran. You're going to see that in the Seerah. You're going to see that in the Hadith, that if you want to know how Allah will be with you, take a look at how you treat people, how you are with people. Are you a generous person? And if you are a generous person with the creation, you can be assured that Allah will be generous with you. And if you're stingy, and this is where it's very scary, if we are stingy with people, like, you know that someone needs your help, you know that you can give and you can actually change someone's life, right? But we hold back, then we should be afraid that Allah would do that with us. And that's the parallel we have to understand. So this is an opportunity, and I always say this when I get the chance to talk to people, like on these causes, is that every single person who's hearing this is hearing it for a reason. Like, there is a purpose why this cause has come in front of your face. And that is that there's something Allah wants from you. It isn't only just so you can click like, right? But it's actually, there's a purpose why everything happens in your life. And there's a purpose for this, that you're hearing that there are people who need your help. There are victims who need your help. That there are people who need a safe space because they don't have somewhere to go, and their children don't have somewhere to go. And if we can help one person in need, this is a promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That we're told by, there's a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ says that if you help a person in need, Allah will help you when you're in need on the Day of Judgment. And I can tell you right now that there is going to be no time that we need it more desperately than on the Day of Judgment. We're going to need that help then. And this is the way to get that guaranteed. Is like, you heard that there's someone who needs your help. These women and children, they need your help. They need your help. I'm telling you right now, I'm going on the record to tell you, it's being recorded. These women and children need your help. Okay, you're hearing it. And the question now is, what did you do? And even if you do something small, Allah will multiply it. And you never know what will protect you on the day of judgment. That's the thing that's so deep, is you never know what action will be the reason why Allah saves you on the day of judgment. And I truly believe that. I truely believe that.
And I just went and donated.
May we all be saved.
I just went and donated because Ustad Amin got me.
Yeah. I got it.
You know Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, the great imam and scholar, and the I don't think he intended to find a madhab, but they call him the founder of the madhab. You know, he had an amazing sadaqah tactic. You guys ready for this?
Yes.
It's gonna break us. Are you ready?
Yes. Yeah, ready.
Put on
ready.
Your floaties, all right? Get your floaties on. This is deep. Okay?
Oh man, I feel like it's gonna hurt. But let's do this.
He used to give sadaqah equal 1-to-1 ratio whenever he purchased something for himself.
Oof.
In order to keep himself honest. And wallahi, I'll tell you guys, I'm not there yet, okay? but whenever I feel the pinch of my nafs not wanting to give, I just go through mentally, I don't actually load my bank statement because that would be not good, because that'd be way too accurate. But I mentally go through the past 7 days, the past 10 days, the past 2 weeks. What have I bought myself?
Yeah.
Right? What things have I bought that I didn't really need, but I wanted, and it's halal? Bought myself another pair of shoes, bought myself some new clothes. Okay.
The new iWatch, the iPhone.
Alhamdulillah,
Apple
you
Watch.
bought those things. You can't buy a pair of shoes for the children of a woman who is leaving the abusive environment that she's in. You can't buy a set of clothes for her. You can't do that. Like, you just bought it. And even, like, think about your own kids. How many toys do you just buy your kids that they don't need, right? We give toys away because we're so drowning in toys.
Yeah.
For our kids. So you can't go buy some toys, right? So for me, that's the method that works for me. Is I always remember Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, this idea that 1-to-1. Okay, you know what? And you know what that does is it actually starts decreasing your shopping budget, because you're like, I can't afford. So you're like, you know what? I really don't need to buy this many or that much. I could. So everybody who's watching right now, think of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. Think of that. And obviously, you have the great examples: the Prophet Abu Bakr Siddiq, Uthman bin Affan, AbdelRahman, etc. Right? You have those people, but this is just a really beautiful methodology. So inshallah, not to take anyone's thunder, but that went in my head right now, and literally, it processed through me, and I went and I gave, because I said, you know what? This week, AbdelRahman, you bought a couple things for yourself. Come on, man, own up, right? Own up. Spend money on other people. Stop spending it just on yourself. Ask Allah to accept from us.
That's so beautiful.
Ameen.
My kids, we do birthday gives, not birthday gifts.
Oh, amazing.
For birthdays, we tell them we have to give a gift. And so now my son is like, where are the children that have very little? That's me.
MashaAllah.
And I still, he's not 4 yet, so I'm scared to take him to that space. So I just they're theoretical. We're gonna buy it. We're gonna drop it off. For them. And so I want to involve them but may Allah make it clear for me and give me ease in figuring out how to do that. But I can't thank you both enough for your time. We're over time, but it was so worth it. I'm really, really stunned by the beauty, the quality, the religious scholarship of both of you, and the quality of the discussion. And thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your tenderness. Thank you for all the examples that you've shared from the prophetic seerah, from the Quran, and from your own lives, and in seeing things happening in the community. I just want to remind everyone that you too can be a part of this effort, and you can transform someone's life with a click. Literally, it'll take you less than 5 minutes. And please, give generously, give a little more, like both Ustad Yasmin and Ustad AbdelRahman have told you, and you will be blessed. It will be returned to you. And the most important time it will return to you is when there is no shade, but Allah out of shade, where we will need the protection, and we will need the cover, and we will need the gentleness. So be gentle with people, and Allah will be gentle with you. Thank you both for your time. I want to remind everyone that Muslim Aid USA is doing this is the global campaign, the first ever against domestic violence. It has domestic projects, it has international projects in Somalia, and we want you to please tune in for the next 2 Thursdays. We will also be speaking to Ala Al-Sayyid and Aisha Prime, both excellent shuyukh and scholars, and as well as Imam Muhammad Majid and the Peaceful Families Project. Thank you both for your time, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the protection that we need and help us help those who really need it the most. Barakallahu feekum for your time.
Ameen. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you all.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah.